Right then,
Okay,
good afternoon,
we are
everybody.
live.
Thank you for joining. If you're here now or if you're watching later, we hope you enjoy our webinar today. We are Little Project Manager, and we are going to be talking about Education 4.0, which is an initiative of the World Economic Forum. And specifically, we're going to be talking about skills development and what that looks like for education, how it's influencing education going forward, and what that means for children as they go through their education journey. A lot of everything that we're going to be looking at today has its basis in this white paper, which was published a couple of years ago now, which was the World Economic Forum defining what they think education should look like going forwards, and they created this taxonomy for learning. I should mention their 4.0 nomenclature that comes from what they see as the newest wave of education. If we look back in the past, we've got education that was really focused on rote learning, very much tied into preparing populations for specific skills in the workforce and factories and things like that. Education 3.0, they're thinking of really as the advent of the internet, when people had access to this research and all these resources, but using it to a fairly limited degree in terms of education. 4.0 is sort of moving beyond that. Rather than just using the internet for information, we're using it to work for us and work with the internet. And it's really more about skills rather than information. And
Yeah,
that's
and
what we're...
Edward,
Sorry,
thank
go
you
on.
for, yeah, just wanted to mention then about your article that you wrote recently outlining the framework and the skills. And I will be adding the link as well below our webinar on the comments if anyone would want to read and get more details and our perspective on the skills that's been discussed.
Absolutely, yes. It's although this is this document, the white paper, is a few years old. It's still something that's very relevant, something that's being talked about at Davos this year. They had some stakeholder engagement panels where the discussion was around partly education 4.0, but also the role of AI. And actually, AI is something we're going to come back to in a future webinar and look at the role of that in the education system. Today, we're really focusing on what Education 4.0 is and how it links to what our vision is in Little PM. So the first thing we've taken from the white paper here to really discuss is the content. And there are four areas here, but essentially, if we think about the content as what skills are being taught, and it's broken down into four areas here. And this isn't so much about how we do it or the minutiae of what we're teaching children, but these are the four broad areas that contain the content that we need to be teaching. So here, first of all, we've got global citizenship skills. I think today that is unavoidable in a good way. We've got people connected all over the world. There's school groups and education companies that are connecting children in schools across the world, and people's lives are impacted by global issues. And I think no matter where you are, your lives are impacted by global issues. So it's important that we build that perspective into our children from a young age. And then secondly, we've got innovation and creativity. I think a lot of the focus of Education 4.0 is to build up skills which are unlikely to be replaced by technology. Obviously, this is a very relevant area of thinking at the moment, but fostering that creativity in children from a young age, that problem solving, different ways of thinking about things, perhaps thinking outside the box, not the most standard way to solve something. That's really important to allow children to have those opportunities to demonstrate that, rather than, as I referred to before, that rote learning where there's one method, one way to do things. So it is a challenge sometimes to teach in that way. Obviously, the wider the scope for the activity, the harder it can be for teachers to sort of plan and deliver. But it is important that we try and foster this from a young age. And then sort of linked onto that, technology. We need our children to be able to use technology in a responsible way, in a safe way. And as I mentioned, we'll come back to this in the future, in future webinars about the use of AI, but it isn't obviously just about AI. We still need to make sure that children have got the basic skills, the basic computer literacy. And I think, I'm sure, Anara, you see this as well with the people you work with, perhaps younger generations who have grown up with touch screens, and they're not as used to using the Excel documents or even just file management and using the computers at that level.
Yeah, it's happening more and more, and I believe there is also kind of a concern of the parents, especially that maybe learning the technology would change as well, as a lot of we'll talk about it in more details and perspective, but a lot of children will now move to the vibe coding, to AI, and leveraging everything new, and they will lose the algorithmic thinking that used to be kind of a base of design and technology and coding. And there are so many examples there. Yeah, and the technology is changing as well, which means that the literacy on how to use it ethically, how to use it properly, we do know that, and we talk about it a lot, I believe, in these days.
Absolutely, and I think it's we've almost got to make a distinction between the technological competency, the actual physical processes of using this technology, and as you say, Nara, using it ethically as well, which I guess links onto this fourth area of content here, the interpersonal skills, because I think that is then touching on these skills that aren't necessarily taught as much or haven't traditionally been taught as much in schools, but it's actually something that is very attractive to employers, having this emotional intelligence, what is right and what is wrong, and also the cooperation as well, and the awareness of societal issues, being aware how we should work together in teams, but also things like why we shouldn't just blindly use technology. We have to have that understanding of what's appropriate in the workplace and what's appropriate in life as well. So, do you think that's something you're experiencing, Nara, that people come out of school not being as prepared with? Do you think these interpersonal skills such as cooperation?
Yeah, I believe that we do have an entire generation that's been affected by developing these skills, especially those that's been developing these skills during the pandemic time, when they've been isolated and they've been remotely connecting. So from what we observe now these days, those young people, they find it a bit more difficult and challenging to develop friendships, to develop a connection, and to learn how to behave in the community, how to express their ideas, and also how to interact, and how to be a friend and be part of the network community as well. So that the challenge we do see, and also at the same time, we find out the other kids that are very agile and adaptive in a way, who learned the remote way of learning and the remote way of interacting with the people. So it's it from one side there is some new skills kids develop, but there are some children who is now struggling because they've been isolated for more than half year from everyone.
And I think it's particularly it had an impact on children who were very early on in their education during the pandemic, where that's formative time really for developing those social skills. And I think perhaps it's a bit of a cliche, but with everything, it's a balance. There was as you said, there's the flexibility, the adaptability of the children who suddenly learned how to use Zoom or using Google Classroom, and those skills will be very good. That's the digital collaboration is really good for the workplace. But at the same time, it's important now to make sure that they have those social experiences. And the white paper mentions actually that a lot of the aptitudes that it talks about, they're teachable skills, they're learnable skills, but they're not necessarily innate skills. And I think that's true to varying extent with with the different aptitudes. I think having the social awareness and the empathy, that is something that is innate to an extent, but it definitely needs building, especially when we've got younger children. Just developmentally, they tend to be a little more egocentric at a young age, and they need to have that opportunity as they go through, particularly primary school, to be guided in ways to interact with others. And I think there's other things as well. The innovation that needs fostering. You might have people who sort of claim to be more creative sort of person, some people who like maybe the more procedural things, but you can either teach that from scratch or you can develop it in children where it's already present. So I think it's important for everyone to remember, even if we say, oh, well, humans are inherently social creatures, that is true, but it doesn't mean we can't build that more and we can't take it to a higher level. And I think that's something that the Education 4.0 framework is encouraging for teachers to push really and make sure that there are enough opportunities. Humans might be inherently social, but if you only ever get them learning grammar and maths, they're not going to have the opportunity for those social skills to flourish. And I think that's the focus of this diagram here from the white paper. If we look at the language that's being used here to include content that focuses, to include content that fosters, it's not specifically saying what schools must do. And I think that's important, that this is adaptable, this framework, for different countries, different curricula. Saying whatever you are doing, make sure you are building the opportunities in these 4 areas. So it's a really nice way to start thinking about it. We will look in a little bit in more detail about the taxonomy of skills, but just as an overview with what is it that this Education 4.0 is trying to achieve. And of course, if we look at what skills are taught, what it's advising, we also need to think about how. Obviously, this white paper doesn't just leave people hanging. It does suggest the methods of how they're being taught. And so we move from the content onto the experiences, which is all about the pedagogy. How are we doing this? Now, the white paper is, in some ways, it's assuming knowledge from educators about the state of education at the moment and what current trends and patterns have been in education over the years. I think there's definitely been a push in the last decade, at the very least, and probably before that, to adopt this sort of social and collaborative learning. Obviously, the foundation for these theories goes back to the 60s, 70s, the 80s, when this idea of social constructivism is coming in. We've got the experiential learning, all these sorts of new ways of thinking, which really is boosting that education 2.0, the education 3.0. So the white paper is almost starting from that point in thinking, what else can we be doing differently? How else can we be teaching? So let's have a look through these 4 points, because these are quite not necessarily obvious, but they're definitely taking things to another level. We've got personalized and self-paced learning here. Of course, it's been a thing in schools for a long time, how we should personalize the learning, how we should differentiate the learning, how we should make sure it is appropriate to children's needs. There's a lot of schools now who process a lot of data about children. They collect data, their test results, everything like this. And that's fine, but always the point is, what are we doing with that data? It doesn't necessarily have to be this formal summative data. It could just be what the teacher is learning about the children. You can make observations, write reports and things like that, but you need to put it into practice. And that's what the framework here is advocating for. It's thinking, how can we take on board the needs of the learner and help them progress at their own pace? And I think definitely this is something that's becoming, I suppose, more relevant as we think about the rise of AI. Again, I don't want to touch on that too much today, but I think that is something that is becoming quite a current conversation, this use of AI tutors and personalization of learning.
Because I think nowadays we do have more tools to provide
Yes.
personalized training compared to the previous years, as As you said, we do have hold those data, we collect them. Do we manage and do we actually look to the child? Maybe it was we haven't had resources or the tools before, but now it's with the technology, it's becoming easier to manage it as well and to deliver.
Absolutely. I think, as you say, there are the tools there. There's really not the excuse anymore. And I wouldn't say that that's. I wouldn't say that this idea of personalizing learning is new per se, but I think it is evolving what that looks like. Um, and it sort of links on then to the second point here, the accessible and inclusive learning. Um, when we are having this different approach to education and having this the focus on skills, it allows schools to then refocus to their pupils' contexts. There's no point taking a system that was designed for a particular country, a particular group of children, then trying to apply it to a context where it doesn't fit. Where we want children to have learning that's relevant to them, because if we have that connection, it's going to engage them in the education more. Engagement's obviously a big issue in some education systems at the moment, and it's making sure that everyone can access the learning. And obviously, technology plays a role there as well in terms of accessibility and inclusivity. But it's not just about making small tweaks, making provision for children, for particular students. It's about thinking from the ground up. How can we change what we're teaching or the way that we're teaching things to make it inclusive for everyone? If we think about special educational needs, something that I was always taught as an educator, and something that I maintain to this day. Any provision you make to help the children with special educational needs will tend to have a benefit for everyone in the classroom. So rather than starting with what we think is the norm and then making small adaptations, we really need to make sure that we are starting from a point of relevance for the whole class. And it changes the way we think about it, rather than thinking about the knowledge and the objectives. Think about what do these children need, what skills do they need for life, and that then leads on to the third point, the problem-based and collaborative learning. If we are having projects that require children to solve problems, we want to make sure that they are relevant. We don't want I think a good example. We don't want to be giving children real life problems to do with recycling and waste management if their community, if their country is already really good. Taking Rwanda, for example, they've got excellent policies in place already about use of not using plastic carrier bags, and community involvement in waste management, things like that. We don't want to be sort of preaching to the choir. We want to make sure that the projects, the problem-based learning, is relevant for that community, for that context. If we give the children a reason to care, then they're going to engage in the learning and they're going to get something from it. And as it mentions here, it more closely mirrors the future of work. And I think, do you think, Anara, that's fair to say that problem-based learning is more relevant when they get into the workplace?
Yeah, and also just to add on that, when it's problem-based learning, because it's a real case and because it's a real problem, then the engagement increases and there is really willingness to solve it. And we see it so many times for both of the points, accessible and inclusive training, learning, as well as the problem-based. When we've been running our workshop, we see how having these goals and approaches in designing the classroom activities impacts the engagement and the satisfaction of the activities, because children, they do care for the world, they do care for the people, and having them put their thoughts and put their actions on the table to solve those solutions, it's really means for them, and
Yeah.
they are really willing to help on solving those.
And I think this idea of problem-based learning or collaborative learning, it's perhaps easy to think about it, maybe for educators, in terms of the foundation subjects, our humanities, the social studies, the
Mhm.
citizenship. Um, but that's not what Education 4.0 is limited to as well. We need to be thinking about what impact it can have on our core subjects, the maths, English, and science as well, because that's just as important. And in some ways, that's where progress needs to be more, I think. I think it's very easy to, particularly in maths, to focus on just the facts, the knowledge, test that because it's easy to test, it's easy to mark. But we want children to be looking at problem-based learning in maths. We want them to be looking at real life in problems in maths. Um, this is a focus in the UK at the moment, actually. The the House of Lords has got a numeracy for life committee, which is trying to address the issue of low numeracy rates in the UK. Um, and um, um, we had Professor Hannah Fry, actually, who is the Professor of Public Understanding at Cambridge. She was talking in this committee about the fact that we need to make sure that when we are doing maths education, we are linking it to the problems that students will encounter when they go into the real world, looking at finances, looking at loans, looking at perhaps budgets in companies that they go to work for as well. But
Mhm.
also, by giving children, and this was her phrase, a reason to care about the subject, we're going to improve engagement. And we're going to give them the reason to care by thinking about how we restructure and how we reteach and how we teach in this maths in a different way. Um,
Mhm.
it's difficult, I think, because it does require initially a lot of effort to overhaul practices. And there is the pressure as well that schools still have to produce results. Today in England, children are sitting their maths SATs exams, and those results are going to have an impact on perceptions of schools. The data is a massive thing, and it's then very hard for schools to think, right, well, let's try some problem-based collaborative learning. Let's overhaul what we're doing. When at the end of the day, at the end of Key Stage 2, they're still expected to produce these results in their children. So I think we do have to think it's not just the teachers who want to try something innovative, want to try something new. It's actually the systems behind that as well. It's what the curriculum looks like, it's what the testing looks like, and it's what the education policy looks like as well. And I'm just using the UK as an example there because it's particularly relevant today. But it's something that countries across the world are going to be looking at. What is the future of education? How can we make our maths learning link more to finances? How can we make our English teaching link more to communication in the age where we've got large language models being able to produce text in different styles? So we need to understand what the problems of the world are and think, how can we really change our education systems to prepare children for that? And which links really to
Yeah.
that last point, lifelong and student-driven learning. This is something that continues throughout life.
Yeah, I think the applicability of the knowledge that really motivates a lot of
Mm.
students, regardless of their age, rather than just learning apples, learning coins would be more interesting. Just a simple example for the early years, right? But
Yes,
even
yeah.
for the adults, if they would whatever knowledge they got in the school, if they could have used the cases, if they could have used the real examples, and
Mm.
then understood why they are learning those fundamentals, not because it's meant to be taught in the school for some reason for the SATs or others, but it's really help you to understand the world, how the world is designed, and how you can apply your
Mm.
knowledge and etc. It helps.
Yeah.
And also it kind of links your knowledge to your future, um, whatever you would like to do in your life. Maybe it will develop the passion because you would love the math, and then you would link math to the financial literacy,
Mm.
and then you would understand where you would like to grow as a professional or what kind of activities you would like to do in the future.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to, as the world of work is changing, as different industries are blossoming, and other industries perhaps are on the decline, it's important that children understand what this is going to be like. It's fantastic when children have the careers counselors, when they're 17, 18, in some ways, that's a bit late. If the children aren't
Mhm.
exposed to what the world is like, what jobs there might be, what life can be like for them, if they're not exposed to that from a young age, it's they might not necessarily commit themselves to a particular area of study. We don't want a child to get to 17, 18, talk to a careers counselor about what they want, and then realize, oh, I perhaps should have been focusing more on maths for the past 10 years, but I didn't know that was going to be relevant for what I want to do. Um, we've got to bring this in from a young age. And you mentioned early years there, and
Mhm.
that's what we're thinking about in Little Project Manager as well. In an appropriate way, if we make experiential learning um, happen, if we give these children the opportunities at their level to experience collaboration, to experience problem-based learning, then we're giving them a really solid foundation as they move up through education. So I think then that brings us on well to the more detailed taxonomy. This is on that white paper, so if you do want to look at this in more detail, you can see it there, and there are websites as well. The World Economic Forum's website does have this taxonomy where you can explore it. Um, but the way it's structured is that we've got these three large areas, which are not new within education, looking at abilities and skills, attitudes and values, and then knowledge and information. But then it's breaking this down into other skills. And importantly, it's bringing in those social skills and societal skills, which, as I mentioned before, they're the ones that are very valuable in the workplace, but perhaps are missing a bit more in the education system. Um, very importantly, I want to mention at the bottom there is the knowledge and information. It is not the priority here. And we need to make sure that parents, educators, and children understand that it is the skills that's going to help them. We have a lot of access to knowledge today. Um, we need to be thinking about how children can use that information, how children can use the knowledge. Um, that's not to say we get rid of knowledge-based learning entirely. Children have to have that basic numeracy, basic literacy, basic science knowledge. Of course they do, but we should always be focusing on the application of that. And this on the right-hand side of the screen is these colourful skills there. They are our 10 core skills at Little Project Manager. So really this is just to show at a glance very visually how well aligned we are with Education 4.0. And it's so well aligned, I should say, that we did come up with this completely independently. This has always been our passion, the driving force behind
Yeah.
Little, but it's really pleasing, I think, in order to see how well we align with Education 4.0.
Yeah, it feels to the extent of the common sense, and also the need, because when we've been designing this framework, we've been looking from the perspective of developing the holistic skills of the child, and what the demand of the current years would be there. So we've been looking on which skills really requires embracing and attention at the school as well. And yeah, it's a nice surprise to see that Education 4.0 are looking for all of them and covering the base as well.
Exactly, and I think where we've not got those specific links. I think you could perhaps make some more links to the Little PM skills. Obviously, we don't want to over clutter the screen with lots of lines. But this is similar to what we have done before in Little PM, looking at how we align with different education systems, different curricula. We align very well with the IB primary years program. We align well with the US social studies and the UK national curriculum as well. But this has been sort of, I think, the clearest one by far to show our ethos. It's not just where we can help schools; it's where we are from a values point of view, I think. And something that we're not showing here, but it is mentioned in the white paper, is that the Education 4.0 taxonomy was specifically designed to link up with the World Economic Forum's global skills taxonomy, which is what they advise should be sort of promoted in the workplace. So each one of these skills links directly with part of the global skills taxonomy. And I think it's important to think about the link between skills in the classroom and skills in the workplace. I think there is a lot of overlap, and I think it's important for educators to understand this, and I think it's important for employers to understand this as well, what the links between them are. Um, my my only sort of query would be, well, not query so much as a point to be aware of, as technology changes very quickly, and we are in a time now where technology is changing quickly. The demand for skills in the workplace will also change as well. That's not to say that these skills are defunct, far from it. It's more to be aware of there has to be some fluidity, and these sorts of taxonomies have to be a bit dynamic because change is happening so fast. I think the demand for skills in the workplace isn't always fixed. Although I think what is good is because we've got the different levels of this taxonomy, broadly, these broad categories are always going to hold true. We are always going to need cognitive ability and social ability, both in school and in the workplace. It might be that these specific elements, these specific aptitudes, it's going to change what they look like. So problem solving and maybe digital skills and programming, that is going to what that looks like in the workplace, I think, is going to change as technology develops, particularly with the programming. As you mentioned earlier, Anara, with the advent of vibe coding, there are more of these skills that I think technology is going to have an impact on than others. Something like grit, for example, or curiosity, I think those are going to be largely unaffected by technology. I don't want to. I hope I'm not going to be proven wrong in 10 years' time, but I think the curiosity that is an innately human characteristic there, and
Yeah.
that's something that's harder to replicate. And then looking down at the attitudes and values in the societal bits, the global citizenship, that responsibility, and the thought towards the environment, that's almost not necessarily in contrast with the development of technology, but it's something we have to be very mindful of as well. We can't just keep developing technology or keep developing our reliance on technology without thinking about the environment as well. Like we know there are already massive impacts, and I think it's hard because different studies will overemphasize or underemphasize the impact of the environmental impact of things like AI, and it's something that's very, very difficult to measure. But if we build this idea into children from a young age, that is something we have to be aware of. We can't have technology without thinking about the ethical and environmental implications. Then hopefully we'll get a better workforce for the future than if we didn't instill these things in children.
In the professional world, all of those skills are being taught throughout the professional life. And those individuals who hold most of those skills and who excel on those skills, they are actually more successful, and they're more dynamic, and they grow faster. And also, if they have their own passion, their own company or the startup, with this package of the skills, they achieve their goals much faster, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we can also think about is, and we've talked a lot about sort of the workplace, and obviously this document is from the World Economic Forum, so we should expect there to be the focus on employment and business. But we need to think as well about just being humans. The OECD released a document, I think last year, called Education for Human Flourishing. And I think it's important to think about how, if we removed the employment aspect, if we have somebody who's lucky enough to not necessarily be so focused on employment, these are important skills for life outside of employment. We want to create children who are creative, who can think critically, who are curious, and who have that emotional awareness. So just in the same way that education shouldn't be all about the data and the tests and the results, neither should these skills purely be about employability. I think these are very important skills for all aspects of life as well, and relationships and health and everything like that. So that's what we want in schools as well. We want schools to be not just creating children who are ready for the workplace, but are ready for life as well.
Mhm.
Having the critical thinking, and the critical thinking in terms of things like maths as well, that's going to impact financial decisions in their personal lives as well. And again, just to link back to something that Professor Hannah Fry was saying as well, it can reach into areas of our lives where we don't expect, such as medical diagnoses, treatment paths, healthy life choices, and things like that. A lot of these skills are helping people in those very sort of personal and health related areas as well.
Mhm.
So it isn't just about education, even though it's called Education 4.0. It's not just about school and the work. These are important skills for life.
Yeah.
But I think we could have a look at some of our little PM units and
Yeah.
how we're developing some skills there. Um, Now we do have a lot of different units already in Little Project Manager, and we're creating more all the time in response really to what's needed and what specific context is needed. As we mentioned before, we can't just have a one size fits all approach. But these are some of our units that we have created, we have tried out as well, and we're linking really just for demonstrative purposes to three of the level 3 elements
Mhm.
in the taxonomy: creativity, environmental stewardship, and global citizenship. Um, so, what's important, I think, to mention is that in the Education 4.0 paper, they give examples themselves of experiential learning, and they emphasize the fact that an experience might be primarily designed to foster or to develop one particular skill, whether it be collaboration or communication, but inevitably you are going to have some overlap. If we are talking about negotiation or leadership, you obviously can't develop that without also developing communication at the same time. So whilst we've picked out 3 units here to particularly emphasize three of the skills that are common to both
Mhm.
the Education 4.0 and Little PM, obviously we are giving children an opportunity for several skills there. Um,
Mhm.
if we were doing units perhaps for the early years, then our focus might be more on a single skill. But as the children move up through Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, and then maybe into secondary school, it's natural that they're going to be developing multiple skills concurrently. So our first one here, to do with creativity, is our comic strip creation. Again, we're trying to make a link always from the start. What might engage the children? What might they see relevant for something that they enjoy,
Mhm.
what they do in life as well? But we're linking it to storytelling. So we're linked to that the oracy, which will come through in their English or their language skills. And the idea of this is that they've got to create a comic strip to tell a specific story in one page. And I think children naturally react to this. Oh, I think it's only one page. That's going to be easy. But actually, then we're bringing in the problem solving where, oh, we've only got one page. We've got five
Yeah.
panels to tell a particular story, and I think that's where
Mhm.
the challenge can come in. Do you think,
Mhm.
Laura, that's something that children might initially think is easy, but then realize there's a bit more to it?
I think if I would be putting myself into that position, I would think, oh, one page is easy. I'll do it very quickly. But then when you start kind of putting all of your ideas and the stories, so one page is not enough. And also, when it's done in the team environment,
Mm.
they need to as well to decide, right, how the story will evolve and what the characters will do and how it will be described. So it's an additional nice challenge for the children and also for the team itself in negotiating, deciding, agreeing. all all those dynamics go within that group.
Absolutely. I think what's nice
Um,
about this one is that it is a short one, but it's very easily repeatable. I think a lot of the time in perhaps project-based learning or experiential learning, we want to emphasize the reflection and self-assessment side of things, but sometimes we don't necessarily get the opportunity to enact
mhm,
those. If children have been making quite a large model in design technology, for example, they might be working on that for a few weeks. Then they, of course, they evaluate it at the end, but then there's not really the time to do that whole thing again. Whereas with something the comics creation, you can have the same idea but adapt it for different contexts. So you might do it
Yeah.
related to history, or then you might relate it to sociology or PSHE or something like that. So they can repeat this activity, hone their skills, and then actually think, what did we do last time? How can we improve it? How can we improve it when we
Yeah.
do it again? And it's always nice to have a physical product at the end. One of the theorists we really like in Little PM is Simon Pepper, who had his constructionism, and he argued that if children can actually make a physical thing, that's really sort of inspiring. That's really empowering for children as well. So having that physical product is really nice.
Yeah, they always love to bring it home to show to parents or to show to friends, and especially because it's comics, they then show to all of the friends and the peers because it's
Absolutely.
fun.
And it's something that's very easy as well to photocopy as well. You can have it bound in the classroom, put it in your reading corner. It's nice for them to see each other's work. And again, it's something they can be really proud of and can go back to. I've always loved having books or work in the book corner that my class had made, and they choose that so much of the time. You know, it's always a really popular one. Once it's there, we think, yeah, we made this and we
Yeah,
worked together to create this.
yeah,
Um,
being proud of their work.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'll skip down to the one at the bottom there, the heritage one, which in some ways has its similarity, where we've got different groups of children working together to create a final product. And this one's really focusing on the heritage. I think sometimes, obviously, if children are friends with each other, they perhaps will see each other outside of school. But in some ways, you know, they're in their world. They might think they go home and then they forget about other children in their class. They don't necessarily think about what life is like for other children. And this is a particularly nice one when you've got a class that has quite a diverse range of children whose home lives might look very different. They might have different traditions. And the point of this one really is for children to go home, their talk to their family members, or think about something a meal that they think is particularly important to them. They might talk to their wider family as well, and then they're bringing that back into the classroom, and they're working on making a recipe book together that's bringing together experiences and traditions from everyone in the classroom. And we want to make sure as well, the way that we've designed this unit with all the supporting resources that we've made, as we do for all Little PM units, we're guiding the children through to make a high quality product. I think this is something that you could perhaps give to the children and say, right, this is what we're doing, off you go. And you might not necessarily get a high quality product. So of course we want to celebrate the heritage here, the different cultures, but we want to guide children through the process. We want to guide them through how to work collaboratively. So at the end, they've got a really high quality product that they can be proud of. And then they understand, oh, this is how we made the cultural recipe book. They can take that sort of that thinking forward to other things rather than just rushing into it without that planning, the preparation, the delegation. And again, you've got this physical product at the end, which is always really nice as well. I think that's an important skill going into the world of work. I think, Inara, you know, not just rushing into a project, thinking about how we outline it, how we prepare for it, rather than just going for it.
Yeah, structure means a lot, and kind of having the skill to navigate in the structure and also to produce the results is very important. Some would argue that structure will limit, but on the other side, it gives so much freedom to think about the stuff that really matters. It's like if you're talking about the cultural recipe book, we do have a structure there, but then their focus will be more on the discussion, on comparing what the meals are on the other side. But then at the end of the unit, they really have a proper result. And building up that structure into the mind, it helps a lot in the real world. Like regardless of what you're doing, going to the trip with the family or organizing your birthday, or any other activities, having a structure helps a lot in achieving the result. And what I've heard a lot of time is like, uh, if the one of the child's been a project manager in one of the classes, there's like, can I be now a team member on the next one, or the other one? Can I now lead the team? And hearing that the children would like to engage in this sort of activities again and again proves that they enjoy it, and they learn from each other, and they have an opportunity to have a different roles as well, which
Yeah.
I think very important for them.
Yeah, and it's about learning what that sort of role involves as well. I think maybe the first time children do a unit like this, um, they don't really know what it means to be the leader, and they also are clamoring for it. And then once they get into it, they realize what responsibilities that involves as well. And
Yeah.
understanding the roles is a really important part of what we're developing. And I think it's interesting what you said about it can seem a little restrictive having sort of the process, but no, I agree with what you're saying. The structure is really important, and there's still a vast amount of opportunity for creativity within that. And I think we've got to remember as well, this one we designed particularly for sort of lower key stage two, sort of the 7, 8, 9 years old. We can't as educators just say, oh, we're teaching project management, we want open-ended learning, and then leave them to it. We still have to give them the guidance. They've got to learn these skills with some support as well. So we're still allowing for creativity, but actually we're doing it in a way that makes the children feel enabled to take a bit of risk, take a bit of creativity, because they've got that support of the guidelines in place. They're not. I think if we allow children to be completely open-ended, we don't necessarily get the high quality education experiences that we expect, and also children can feel a little unnerved by that as well, especially if they've been used to quite rigorous learning in the same format all the time. We have to give them
Yeah.
some structure, some support to help them get to know these skills. And
And
then
then like, yeah,
go on, please.
yeah, the next one is one of my favorites. That involves the simulation and a lot of discussions among the teams.
Yeah, it's our one of our ones that connects to sustainability and linking back to Education 4.0, that environmental stewardship. And just think about coastline development. This will tie into lots of geography objectives for various curricula, but also it's to do with you're looking at your local area, so that citizenship side of things. And essentially, this at the core of this project, we have a simulation of a coastline where there might be storm surges. It's obviously simplified, not very sort of high level hydrological modeling, but the point of it is the simulation works to allow children to experiment with different solutions and try them out in a way that is promoting their problem solving. We've adapted this for sort of the Middle East, where we have mangrove forests, but also for the UK when we're looking at sand dunes and coastal grasses as well. So children are looking at the differences between soft engineering techniques, the natural engineering techniques, and more hard engineering techniques such as concrete walls, and they can input these different strategies into the simulation and then run it. And then the way it works, in a simulation, 1 second represents 1 year. And so they can go through 200 years and look at how the durability and the impact of these different solutions, and also how these different solutions affect carbon dioxide sequestration, and how it impacts biodiversity as well. So it's not just about the physical protection of the coastline, it's about thinking of solutions that are good for the environment as well. And importantly, thinking back to what we were just talking about, we're giving them a project goal to work towards, and we give them constraints. There are financial constraints within the simulation as well, but it is their decision how they're going to discuss, plan, and enact the solutions, and they will have to report back to the other groups what was their strategy, and ultimately did it work as well. So it's wonderful to see all the different ways that the children take this goal and come up with their own solutions, and then also be accountable as well. Explain what they did and if it was successful.
Yeah, that's true. And what is just interesting to observe, one unit, one topic covers several skills,
Mm,
and across all other units that we have, they are always interlinked different skills, and children have an opportunity to develop them. And the I think the best part is that by practicing in using those skills,
mm,
from unit to unit, from exercise to exercise, they get more confident on them. They
mm,
are more confidently negotiate. They more confidently express their ideas. They are also more confidently explores the world of creativity and the solving the problem, and
mm,
being a leader, being a team member, collaboration. So the more they're involved in that environment, in that game, the more they really use it, and then it's embeds, those skills getting embedded, and then they are using it on a daily life, which is actually what we want them to learn it, not explicitly but implicitly by doing the fun exercise, which have a learning goals as well, and which engages all of them, and knowing that it's not only us trying to pitch for the skill development, but it's also the World Economic Forum who is saying that it's a time, let's look into the skills of the children, let's provide for them the environment and the tools to develop those skills. It's really a huge endorsement, I believe.
absolutely. And I think as well, to just very quickly mention about the digital aspect of these. Our stimulation, as you might expect, it is a digital one, and but it's a very
Mhm.
focused use of that technology there, and we're not wanting children to have a using their digital technology for the sake of it, which I think you mentioned near the beginning, Nara. That's sort of a part of the
Mhm.
conversation about the debate with parents at the moment, the use of technology uh, in
Mhm.
in education. And I think this unit is a really good one to highlight how we can use technology very specifically, where using the screen
Mhm.
isn't the lesson. That's not the point of the lesson. The point of the lesson is the communication. It's the problem solving
Mhm.
with the theme of environmental stewardship, and we are using
Yeah.
technology to help achieve that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
because in this particular case, technology allows us to simulate different scenarios, and it allows us to live several years uh, in one go, right? So we can see how the coastline are getting changed and impacted. And for the children, it's also good. They observe how year over the year the changes happen, and
Exactly.
also they can implement their strategies there.
Yeah, and I think as well, we it's helping teachers cover a lot in one lesson. I think if you did this perhaps with more traditional learning, looked at what are soft engineering techniques, what are hard engineering techniques? Can we look at a case study? Can we look at what biodiversity means? Can we link it to our science learning with our CO2 and the CO2 cycle and
Hmm.
or the water cycle and everything like this, that's a lot of lessons that you're going to need to take. Whereas by experiencing it, you're getting a lot of that learning happening in one lesson. That's not to say the
Hmm.
children won't immediately learn everything in one lesson, but actually you're
Hmm.
compacting the learning and you're having a more enriched learning experience. And you can always follow this up with other teaching as well. But we're starting from a
Hmm.
core experience where children are getting a lot of educational value in a short session rather than
Hmm.
may not pick up week to week with a 1 hour a week with more traditional pedagogical methods.
Yeah, yeah, so true. In the comment section, we had a question related to the presentation. We'll share it. I also added the link to the Edwards article on our view on that, and also I've added the white paper link for the Education 4.0 if anyone would like to read what World Economic Forum wrote about there. Yeah, you'll find all of those links in our comments.
Yeah.
And
And
thank you, Edwards, for facilitating
not
this
at all.
discussion.
I'm looking forward to sort of continuing this conversation, but having more of a focus on AI next time,
Yeah.
because World Economic Forum has come up with a new document specifically looking at how AI is playing a role in
Mhm.
Education 4.0. So we'll be discussing that next time, I think.
Yeah, yeah, we'll be having a guest as well. We'll announce it on our channels. And yeah, please join us for our webinars. And we'll be bringing up interesting subjects for you as a parent, for you as an educator, for you as someone who is passionate for the teaching project management for children as well, and the skills. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.